Dobro. History. Archive.
Today we're diving into a maritime mystery. It's a story about a ghost ship, a violent collision in a storm, and a secret that was buried for decades by a military regime that was more afraid of the truth than the sea itself. This is the incredible story of Patrol Boat 72.
You know, it's one of those big, poetic questions, right? But for the men in this story, it was a terrifying, very real question. The ocean is just so vast, so deep, but can it really, truly hide a secret forever?
Well, for 40 decades, the answer was a resounding yes. 40 years. 40 years of silence, of unanswered questions, of families trapped in a state of grief that couldn't move forward. That's a whole lifetime for some people.
But here's the thing about the ocean. Eventually, it gives up its secrets. And for the families of 17 sailors who were lost to the deep, the story wasn't over, not by a long shot. It was just waiting to be found.
So our story actually kicks off not way back then, but in 2019, with this really high-tech search that finally located the ghost that had been haunting the East Sea for nearly half a century.
So how in the world do you find a 60-ton needle in a massive watery haystack? Well, scientists from the Korea Institute of Ocean Science and Technology used this brilliant three-step process. First, they used sonar to basically paint a picture of the seafloor with sound. Then, they brought in a magnetometer to hunt for the magnetic signature of a steel hull, something that would stand out from the rocks. And once they had a hit, they sent down the robot.
And they found it. Get this. At a crushing depth of 105 meters. That's over 340 feet down, under about 11 times the atmospheric pressure you're feeling right now. We're talking about a place of total, eternal darkness and immense cold. And then, there it is. The lights from the remotely operated vehicle sliced through the gloom, and there she was, Patrol Boat 72, sitting perfectly upright on the seabed, almost as if it was still on patrol, just covered in 40 years of marine life. The ghost had been found. But to understand how it got there, we have to go back.
Okay, so to really understand how this happened, we have to rewind to the night of the disaster, January 23rd, 1980. And this wasn't just a simple accident. It was a tragedy born from a perfect storm of political paranoia and some literally terrifying weather.
So you gotta understand the political scene at the time. South Korea in early 1980 was a nation just spinning. Its longtime dictator was dead. A new, illegitimate military junta, led by a guy named Chun Do-hwan, had just grabbed power. And this new regime was paranoid, desperate to look strong, and totally in control. That meant the military was on a hair trigger, ordered to be hyper-vigilant against any threat from North Korea.
Now mix that political pressure cooker with this, a sea state that was described as the Winter of Terror. We're talking waves over 13 feet high, which is terrifying for a small boat. Visibility was practically zero because of the sea spray. And the freezing air was coating the entire ship in ice, making it top-heavy and dangerously unstable. It was just a chaotic, deafening nightmare out there.
And in all that chaos, their technology actually turned against them. The radar screens were flooded with something called sea return. Basically, the massive waves were creating thousands of false blips or ghost targets. So the crew was ordered to chase what was almost certainly a phantom spy boat that was just created by the storm itself.
And so two friendly ships are sent chasing this phantom in a blinding storm. And this is where the physics of the situation just becomes brutal. You've got Patrol Boat 72, a tiny 60-ton vessel, and Patrol Ship 207, which was more than 3 times its size, a 200-ton steel hammer to P-72's aluminum eggshell.
So who were these 17 souls on that smaller ship? This wasn't just a number. It was a mix of career sailors, men who had made the sea their life, and a group of young combat police. These were kids, really, in their early 20s, just doing their mandatory military service. They were sons, students, caught in a total nightmare.
The prow of the larger ship just plowed into P-72. The hull would have been torn open instantly. Power gone, complete darkness. The boat probably capsized or just disintegrated in seconds. And in water that was only 2 to 4 degrees Celsius, the cold shock would have been immediate. There was simply no time and absolutely no chance.
So, the collision. That was the first catastrophe. But believe it or not, the second one was just getting started. And this one was deliberate. This was the state-sponsored cover-up. The 40-year silence.
See, for this brand new military junta, losing a patrol boat in a friendly fire incident while chasing an enemy that didn't even exist, that was a PR nightmare. It made them look completely incompetent. So the truth was buried. The incident was sealed away in what one source calls administrative amber, and the media was totally forbidden from reporting on it.
And what this did to the families, well, it's a specific kind of psychological torture called ambiguous loss. Their loved ones were physically gone, but psychologically, they were always there. With no bodies to bury, no official funeral, no real closure, their grief was just frozen in place for decades.
And this one detail from the report, man, it's just gut-wrenching. Can you imagine going to a funeral for your son or your husband and you're weeping over an empty box, a box that just contains a uniform? It was a performance of grief because the real thing, the ability to actually mourn, was completely denied to them.
And you can really see how unjust this was when you compare it to a more recent tragedy. In 2010, the warship Chonon was sunk by North Korea. Its sailors were rightly declared national heroes. Their ship was raised and turned into a memorial. The P-72 crew died defending the exact same border, but because they served under a dictatorship, their sacrifice was hidden. The difference wasn't their service, it was their government.
All right, so the discovery in 2019 breaks this 40-year silence. But it opens up this whole new, really complex question that brings us right up to today. What do we do now? Do you raise the ship or do you let its crew rest in peace?
If you ask the families, the answer is crystal clear. Their plea is a moral one. They say that for 40 years the state failed these men. So now the state has a duty to finish the mission, to bring them home. Leaving them in the cold, dark deep is, to them, just a continuation of that failure.
But then you run into the harsh physical reality of it all. After 40 years underwater, the hull is severely corroded. Trying to lift it could literally cause it to break apart, destroying the very thing they're trying to recover. The wreck is also draped in discarded fishing nets, so-called ghost nets, which are deadly traps for divers and robots. And of course, the cost is astronomical.
So this debate kind of stalls for a few years. And then, of all things, a popular TV show in 2024 completely changes the game. The show, called Kokomu, retold this story for a new generation. It powerfully connected the family's personal grief to the political cover-up, and it sparked this new wave of public outrage. That put immense pressure on the government to act, forcing them to take another hard look at the salvage mission.
Which leaves us with this final, really haunting question. Science broke a 40-year silence. It proved that while a government can try to hide history, the ocean, well, it keeps its own records. But now that we know where these men are, what's the right thing to do? Is this a rescue mission to finally bring home fallen heroes? Or has their ship, still sitting on patrol at the bottom of the sea, become their final, rightful tomb?